We move over to love-hate pass catchers, and we start with George Pickens, who life has been good for George Pickens since Russell Wilson took over under center. Wide receiver 6 in points per game since Russ became the starter. We got to hear from both Russ and Pickens on their relationship.
George is just, he's been really showing up in special ways, man. I just got so much confidence in him, who he is, the competitor that he is. His practice habits have continued to grow, and he's a warrior out there, and it's how he prepares.
Russ was just saying your relationship, how quickly it's grown. From your standpoint, why has that grown so quickly?
I'll probably just say repetition, for sure. Throwing after practice, throwing before practice, watching memes, watching films, and, other guys, so we can get our connection, to where it's A1. I'll probably say that's the most thing.
Love-hate pass catchers, such a different vibe. Russ is like if you casted a quarterback to play in a movie, where George Pickens is just big chilling all the time. Wow,
1,000%.
But big fan of each other, quite clearly, Matthew.
Well, obviously, because Russell just throws up these moon balls and Pickens makes him look brilliant.
Right.
He comes down with it, and if you're George Pickens, you're like, all right, Russ ain't great, but he ain't Kenny Pickett or Trubisky or
Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, or Mason Rudolph or any of the other guys they've rolled out there. Duck Hodges, was it?
It was a Duck Hodges era.
Yeah.
Maybe not long, but it existed.
Yeah, we miss Duck Hodges.
Mike Tomlin has really had a lot of tricks up his sleeve.
Yeah.
It's amazing they're always competitive.
Yeah.
He's just the greatest coach of all time.
He's amazing.
It's unbelievable.
Like he just Steelers quarterbacks over the years. Like how about a little Bubby Brister? How about Mike Tomczak?
It's nuts.
Yeah, great outside of Roethlisberger.
At any rate, George Pickens makes the love list this week. I have him as a top 5 fantasy play this week since Russell Wilson took over as a starter. He's the 6th best wide receiver in fantasy football, and you love the matchup against the Ravens, right? As good as the Ravens are against the run, they're that bad against the pass. They've given up at least 23 fantasy points to a wide receiver in 5 of their 6 games, 5 of their past 6, I should say as well. No team allows more touchdowns to wide receivers this season than the Baltimore Ravens. They've given up multiple wide receiver touchdowns in 4 of the past 6 as well. You can throw, and you can throw deep on them. Pickens, who is always a threat to come down with it, just throw it down there, and somewhere he's coming up with it. He makes some head-scratching moves. There's some things that you're just like, but the talent is undeniable with George Pickens, and clearly the way Russ is throwing the ball, Pickens is going to have opportunities in this game.
Yep, Kyle Hamilton as well didn't practice yesterday, which will be huge if he's out, because he is the best player in that secondary by far.
Nico Collins expected to make his return from about a 5-week injury. Texans fans and the Texans love that, and so do fantasy managers, Jay. Dallas has allowed 6 touchdowns to wide receivers over their past 4 games. His offense has really looked rough without their number 1 wide receiver, and maybe the best receiver in all of fantasy before he got hurt.
He was playing like the best receiver in football before he went down against the Bills. Now he gets a very favorable matchup against Dallas. Now the Dallas pass rush will be better with Parsons back healthy for his 2nd game in a row, but these Dallas cornerbacks, Connor, they just haven't, like Trayvon Diggs just doesn't look right. Deron Bland not coming back has really hurt that team, so there's just nothing about the Dallas secondary that scares you.
Yeah, he had 4 healthy games this year, 29% target share, and Cowboys, to your point about that secondary, they've given up 4 touchdowns to wide receivers in just the last 2 games, 6 in the last 4 as well. Nico Collins he's one of the 5 best wide receivers in football when healthy, and this week he's going to be healthy.
Now he'll be playing without Stephon Diggs, so the target share could be somehow even higher. Speaking of which, Calvin Ridley makes the love list for us. I don't know how much of a correlation there is here, Matthew, but since DeAndre Hopkins was traded, Ridley is averaging over 20 points per game.
Yeah, whether it's Mason Rudolph or Will Levis, they're not scared to chuck it and chuck it deep. 36% target share and at least 70 yards, I should say, 70 more receiving yards in all 3 games since DeAndre Hopkins was dealt to Kansas City. It's a nice matchup against Minnesota in this one aspect. They allow the 2nd most receptions per game on deep passes. So they are throwing it deep to Calvin Ridley. No wide receiver in the NFL actually has more deep targets this season than number 0, Calvin Ridley. So they're going to take some deep shots to him, and I think he comes down with at least 1 or 2. I'm as a top 20 play this week.
Yeah, I think the key there is just that Levis looked kind of functional again and normal and throwing it deep. I don't know what happened to him the first 2 months of the season. He just looked like a broken quarterback. He looked so much better in his rookie year, but against the Chargers, he looked like rookie Will Levis, who's not an amazing quarterback, but is good enough to get the ball downfield.
Well, I think he got a little bit of time. I think first off, matchups have been a little bit easier, but also the offensive line was so brutal. He was constant, whether it was the Jets game or the Bears game, he was just under siege. Like I just felt like that entire game. And one of his mistakes was trying to do too much, trying to do too much kind of superhero ball.
He almost needed the break.
Yeah, a little bit. Because just he wasn't getting any help from his teammates. So good to see the improved play from last week, and I do think Calvin Ridley's going to have a nice game on Sunday.
Yep. Right now playing right tackle for the Texans is Leroy Watson, whose work I'm not overly familiar with, undrafted out of the UTSA Roadrunners, who I'm not sure are known for their football program. They've cost me a lot of money in college basketball over the journey, the Roadrunners, but I mean, that's where they're at the moment. Yeah. Well, I needed the Roadrunners to cover like a +20 spread, and then they literally didn't hit the rim the last 5 minutes of a game last season. So I'm against.
To be fair,
you're anti-Roadrunner.
Yeah, I'm anti-Roadrunner.
Right.
You kind of
more of a Wile E. Coyote type of guy.
Yeah, fair enough, but in fairness to the Roadrunners, I mean, like if you're betting the UTSA Roadrunners to cover a 20-point spread,
you knew what you signed up for.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly.
I'm looking at it hit the rim for 5 minutes. It's unbelievable. It's just all turnovers and air balls. I've never seen anything like it.
How did you even find the game to watch? Is UTSA on TV a lot?
Well, that's the problem now, is that everything is accessible in various streaming services, so you can always watch these bad teams play. I
remember this might have been 2 or 3 years ago. I had a bet on like the Las Vegas Aces under, like a WNBA game, and like I had to watch it on Facebook.
Yeah.
Like I mean now obviously the WNBA has like a lot more distribution, but I had like a really good WNBA bet that I liked, and like I couldn't find it. Wasn't the only place it aired was like on Facebook.
Yes.
And so I'm sitting there on my phone like.
Now I can get perfect definition of UTSA Roadrunners.
Yeah, exactly. Like play some defense against them.
That's why we do fantasy football, where every game is very accessible, and so is watching Brock Bowers, guys. Since week 5, Bowers is the tight end 3 in points per game. Jay, he's been one of the best values at a position that has hurt a lot of people this year.
Indeed, Gardner Minshew still the quarterback, ending that great suspense.
They've committed to him. They've committed him. They're like, we don't want to like all this.
Oh, now he's just the guy.
Yeah, he's the guy.
Okay.
New offensive scheme. I mean, until he's not.
We'll
but
see
like,
how long that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the old Alien versus Predator. Whoever wins, we lose in that quarterback battle.
A little bit of in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Yes.
Vibes here.
Well, there you go.
It's been a while.
Yeah, welcome back.
Look, Brock Bowers is the number 1 option, clearly, in an NFL offense.
Yes.
And Gardner Minshew, for all his sins, can get the ball to his players. It's just the other stuff, the turnovers, the sacks that kill you with Minshew. But I think it's probably good news overall for Bowers that Minshew is the quarterback.
Since week 5, he's the 3rd best tight end in fantasy football, and he's got a 29% target share during that stretch. To your point, he is like, you'll see some Jacoby Myers as well, but on the road as an underdog, Bowers should get a massive workload here. He's my tight end 3. And again, you've got a new coordinator here calling plays and everything like that, and they'll, like. When you get in there, when you get a new job, you're like, all right, what works here?
Yeah.
You know
or empty the bag on all your best ideas.
You're just going to be like, you know what? Our best chance of success is trying to get the ball into Brock Bowers' hands as much as possible.
Yeah.
So.
It's been a tough season for the Raiders, but Bowers has been awesome week after week. Some others receiving votes: Khalil Shakir for the Bills, Jawan Jennings with an elevated role in San Francisco, Cedric Tillman's looked good since Amari Cooper got traded from the Browns, Quentin Johnston's been a little touchdown dependent, but effective. Dallas Goedert, of course, on Thursday Night Football against the Commanders. And how about Will Disley at the bottom of the list there? Matthew, the Chargers tight end. He's got the Bengals. Tight end 17, but still noteworthy if you're desperate.
He's had a 23% target share 3 of the last 4 games as well. He's definitely and as Justin Herbert started to pass more, again, I think if you're tight end desperate, Will Disley is on the streaming radar. I'm as a top 20 play, but, higher expectations. I do think Dallas Goedert has a nice game tonight against my Commanders. They've given up 3 touchdowns to tight ends in just the last 2 games. Washington has as well. We talked about QJ a lot, but honestly, I think that QJ has a pretty good matchup against Cam Taylor-Britt. Shout out to my friend Mike Clay, who highlighted this matchup in his column. Bengals allow the 4th most yards per game to perimeter wide receivers as well. So I think McConkey actually has the tougher matchup there. I'm heading to Club Said this weekend. Once again,
No
I'm trying to make that happen. There's no cover, Club said. Just Rain's fantasy points there as well. Saints allow the fourth most yards per game to wide receivers. In his 2 starts, he's averaging over 24 fantasy points per game. Give me some Club said this week, except in our league where you outbid me by $1 for him because you were a bastard. I'm in on Juwan Jennings, guys, against Seattle as well. He's top 6 among all wide receivers in yards per target and yards per route run this season. Jennings, we've talked about this a lot. When he gets an opportunity, he produces. It's a good matchup against the Seahawks. And then you mentioned Shakir. He's the one guy that we know is healthy that's going to play. Kincaid's banged up. Amari Cooper's banged up. We know Keon Coleman's not playing in this one as well. And so it does feel like Josh Allen's going to have to throw against the Chiefs in this one as well. Very quietly, 4 straight games with at least 6 receptions, as you mentioned, for Khalil Shakir.
Yep. Jalen Watson going down for the Chiefs has really hurt that defense. More might be the Chiefs' defense. I don't think is as terrifying as it has been in certainly last year and the start of this year.
Only one team gives up more receptions to the slot than the Kansas City Chiefs, so that is an area that field to attack.
The hate list for pass catchers, headlined by Jayden Reed, for all the Bears, rush defense woes over the last 4 weeks. They've been great against receivers, Jay. I mean, they're allowing the second fewest receptions, 6th fewest yards per game to wide receivers. That might be bad news for the Packers' skilled player, Jayden Reed.
Yeah, and for everything going wrong with Chicago, they do have a really good secondary anchored, obviously, by Jalen Johnson. And Reed is just so inconsistent week to week. He hasn't had he's had more than 6 targets once in a game all season this year. He's been hugely dependent on big plays. Had a really nice game against Detroit, going 5 for 113, but tough matchup outdoors on the road against a tough pass defense with lack of clarity about what usage he's going to get week to week. I think he's still starting Jayden Reed because he's Jayden Reed, but I wouldn't have a great deal of confidence.
He's wide receiver 31 for me this week, and the Bears have yet to allow a touchdown to the slot this season. So to your point about inconsistent usage, a lot of mouths to feed in that passing offense. And oh, by the way, the Bears are significant underdogs here in a game in which they don't play good run defense. Like, as you saw earlier in the show, I think it's a big Josh Jacobs game. And so Jayden Reed is a risky low-end wide receiver 3 for me this week.
Josh Downs next on our list, which crushes us because we're big fans of Josh Downs on the show.
Love Josh
but
Downs.
The move back to Anthony Richardson, Matthew, it just kills his efficiency.
I mean, he's caught only 50% of his targets from Anthony Richardson this season. 50%. He's played 3 full games with Richardson. He's been under 6 fantasy points in 2 of them. And the one game that he had off was I remember that it was busted coverage down the sideline. Not only wide open, but he literally had to stop and wait for the ball to get to him. Richardson couldn't hit him in stride. You know the play I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean, he turned around and he kind of waited there, and there was a lot of run after catch. And listen, they all count the same, but the point is, Matthew, that's unlikely to happen again.
Yeah.
I would say where the other 2 games feel like a more realistic sample size of what you would get from Josh Downs rather than the one outlier game.
Yeah.
But with Joe Flacco, lock in 7 catches, 60 to 70 yards every single week.
1,000%. And this is probably something that you don't cover on Badlands, but we highlighted on Worstlands.
Jets play the Colts this week.
Not only did the Jets play the Colts this week, Connor, you probably covered that on Badlands, but I bet you didn't cover the fact that the Jets allow the 2nd fewest yards per game to the slot. That's actually obviously where Downs lines up the majority of the time, and so the expectation here is that they're going to defend him well with a bad quarterback. Again, that's the kind of analysis you're going to get on Worstlands, but you won't find on Badlands where they just blah, 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 Aaron Rodgers,
we hide.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. We're like the mainstream media.
You are the mainstream media.
We hide a lot of the good stuff.
A lot of the good stuff.
For the greater
good.
good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's I'm just telling you right now, what Badlands is nothing but Jets propaganda. That's what it is.
Oh man, if you only knew.
Yeah, that's what I believe it to be. I've never actually listened to a moment of it, but that's what I believe it is. Again, I'm trying to promote my new podcast, Worstlands, and that's all about
the Giants.
The Giants. But we got nothing to talk about. So we could either if we could either talk about the Giants who are bad, or we could just crap all over you and your podcast.
It's probably better
more
content.
Fun.
Way better content.
Thank you. Finally, somebody you understand now. Yes. You get the premise of the show.
Amari Cooper, Jay.
Yeah.
It hasn't been great.
Nice little setup, Connor.
You're welcome. That's why I'm here. Sally left and right.
Yeah.
Listen, Amari Cooper hasn't been great since he's been with the Bills. I know he's been dealing with injury, but the bigger point this week is Kansas City, they shut down perimeter wide receivers.
They do. Now, we'll see how much that continues without Jalen Watson.
Right, that's a good point.
I think that the thing with Amari Cooper is he's played 57 snaps with Josh Allen. And also, I think there's reason to believe that Josh Allen, who I think is the second or third best quarterback in the NFL, there is probably a bit more of a learning curve of playing with Josh Allen than your typical elite quarterback, because so much of his value is outside of structure. Dalton Kincaid spoke about that with us on the show around the Super Bowl. So I think with Cooper, this is a massive game. The Bills are 2.5-point favorites. So they win this, there'll be a game out of the 1 seed. Mahomes v. Allen, which is probably the greatest rivalry in football, just given that Mahomes hasn't played Lamar a ton in the playoffs. So I think that it's just a tough spot for Cooper if he's going to play, and he's banged up and he just hasn't played that much yet, and he'll probably get the McDuffie treatment too.
There's just a lot of uncertainty, right? I mean, tough matchup. How healthy is he? How much on the same page is he with Josh Allen as well? And it isn't a great matchup, even with Watson out. I mean, since week 6, there have been 2 wide receivers, literally 2, that have scored more than 14 fantasy points against the Chiefs as well. They're really good against perimeter wide receivers in general. So I think it's a James Cook game. I think it's a Khalil Shakir game. They try to mix and match. Josh Allen going to do it. Do you like them by 2? Are you surprised? I was surprised that the Bills are. I know the Bills are at home and they're playing well, but the Chiefs are undefeated. And I get it, it's a little bit of luck, and they bet, but they're still undefeated.
Yep. So Patrick Mahomes has been an underdog 14 times in his career. Do you know how many times he hasn't covered? Once. Once out of 14 times he hasn't covered as an underdog. And I think there is something to that. I don't think that's just like a trend that is just luck. I think Mahomes has another gear. I think Andy Reid runs the real plays in these big games as well. Right. So I'd be taking the Chiefs plus 2.5.
Yeah, I definitely like that as well. Last one here, it's Jake Ferguson. I'm outside my top 10 at tight end. Dallas, the third lowest implied team total this week as well. Last week his average depth of target. Do you know what Jake Ferguson's average depth of target was last week?
Was it negative?
0.0.
It's got to be brutal.
0.0 for you Stern fans out there as well. No team allows fewer receptions or yards per game to tight ends than the Houston Texans as well. Bad matchup. Who knows what's going on with the quarterback? Cooper Rush may get pulled for Trey Lance at some point in this game. Hard to trust Jake Ferguson this week. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.